Your Honor, I would like to offer DIX 658.
Hearing no objection, 658 is admitted.
All right. Now, Professor Herrich, I would like to discuss whether, as a matter of fact, sexual orientation does change over time for some individuals. And now, some people do experience considerable fluidity in their sexual orientation throughout their lives, correct?
Some people experience change in fluidity over the course of their lives. There is something that happens, apparently spontaneously, with the individual, as opposed to some interventions being done to make the individual change. But we do know that these changes do occur in some people's lives, yes.
All right, thank you. And for purposes of right now, I'm not particularly interested in discussing the intervention aspect versus other causes, but just whether it's a fact that changes do occur. So some research data suggests that women are somewhat more likely to perceive their sexuality as fluid and involving some degree of choice, correct?
Yes, I think that when we look at women's histories, we do more often see the idea that their romantic relationships and their experience of sexuality are more likely to change or change in more women than is the case for men over the course of their lives.
All right, thank you. Now, on in your direct testimony, you discussed studies that you conducted in which you found that a great many gay men and lesbians felt that they experienced either no choice at all or very little choice about their sexual orientation, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And in these studies, you collected data using sexual identity as opposed to sexual attraction or sexual behavior, correct?
Well, I'm not sure that I completely understand the question.
How did you identify the sample of individuals that you asked the question to? They were based on self-identified, were they not?
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, there was a multiple stage process of obtaining the sample. This was from a survey organization that has basically recruited a very large number of participants to take part in internet research and has provided them with the equipment to do that if they didn't already have it. They have asked the participants in their panel in this large group, they've asked them many demographic questions, one of which was, I may not be getting the wording exactly right, but it was something to the effect of, are you lesbian, gay, or bisexual? And so if they had answered yes to that question, they were considered eligible for participation in one of the studies that I did, the one that I was talking about earlier. In that study, there was then an initial series of screening questions that asked them about their sexual orientation. And in terms of, we basically gave them 5 categories. One, and the questionnaire was tailored to the specific sex of the individual. But I'll tell you, for example, the one directed at men. It would ask them, which of the following best describe them? Gay or homosexual, bisexual, mainly attracted to men, bisexual, equally attracted to both men and women, bisexual, mainly attracted to women, heterosexual, or straight. So in that sense, it really was a bit of a combination of identity labels and pattern of attractions.
Okay, but your initial pool from which you drew were all self-identified individuals who self-identified as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, correct?
They had said yes to the question I described. One thing that we came to realize was that, especially for the bisexual individuals, it's possible that they could have interpreted that as a question about their patterns of attractions or behaviors as well as identity.
Okay, thank you. And you relied on self-reporting in these surveys, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And these studies did not ask any questions that went to whether people's sexual orientation had changed, correct?
That's correct.
And so these studies do not really shed any light upon this question, correct? On the question of whether people's sexual orientation had changed.
No, we did not ask questions about that.
Okay, thank you. And if you're trying to predict for any specific individual whether their identity will predict their sexual behavior in the future, that could be problematic, correct?
I think that if we are talking about general patterns, again, if I were a betting person, I would say that you would do well to bet that their future sexual behavior will correspond to their current identity. But you should also realize that for some individuals, that would not be the case.
All right, thank you. Please turn to tab 2 in your binder. And this is a transcript of your deposition. And I'd like you to turn to page 105. That's the deposition page. And the page at the bottom of the page is 27. There's 4 pages per page, so it's a little complicated.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you say the number?
The page at the bottom is 27, and the deposition page is 105.
Okay.
And I'd like you to look at lines 15 through 18 on that page.
I'm sorry, did you say 27?
It's page 105 in the deposition. The 27 is just the page at the bottom. All right. Now you had a chance to look at those lines?
Yes.
And did you give that testimony at your deposition?
Yes.
Okay, and I'd like to read that, Your Honor. He said, "Now that said, if you are trying to predict for any specific individual whether their identity will predict their sexual behavior in the future, especially, that can be problematic." All right, thank you. And we certainly know that people report that they have experienced a change in their sexual orientation at various points in their life, correct?
I'm sorry, could you say that question one more time?
Sorry. We certainly know that people report that they have experienced a change in their sexual orientation at various points in their life, correct?
Some people do report that, yes.
Okay, thank you. But we don't know why, in every case, people who have experienced a change in their sexual orientation at some point in their life, exactly why that happened in every case, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. And people do not always have a knowledge of their mental processes, correct?
That's true. Yeah, we see that especially in social psychological studies that have looked at prejudice. And it's been repeatedly documented that people are not always aware of their prejudices and biases. And so if you ask them about it, they cannot tell you exactly what's going on. But then other measures have shown that they do in fact have those prejudices and biases.
All right, thank you. So you agree that people don't always have knowledge of mental processes?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Please turn to page 27C in the witness binder.
Tab 27.
27C. And, Your Honor, I want to bring, this is a transcript of portions of the deposition testimony of Ms. Stier, the plaintiff in the case. And this deposition was provisionally designated as confidential, and plaintiffs had 30 days to designate those portions of the deposition that they wished to retain that classification, and they did not do so. And I would like to read some of this into the record, but I think that the parts I plan to read are not sensitive. But if there are any concerns, I don't have any objection to clearing the courtroom and turning off the camera, if that's what you would like to do.
Can I?
Shall
Identify which portion you'd like to read.
Yes, I would. I'll identify them. The lines I'm going to read are page 22, 11 through 15, 24, 5 through 11, 22, 11 through 15, 24, 5 through 11, and 198, 24 through 199, 3. So there's just 3 passages, though I will break them up a little.
Give me the last again, 199.
198, 24 through 199, 3.
All right.
Your Honor, if I could ask a question to opposing counsel through the court, is there any objection to my reading these portions of the transcript?
Mr. Dettmer.
If you could give us just one moment to look them over.
All right, and while they are looking, I will note, I believe these are not particularly sensitive.
I beg your pardon.
I said, Your Honor, while they're looking, I will note that I was careful to try and pick things that I don't believe are particularly sensitive, and I believe they are quite similar to plaintiff's testimony given in court.
Your Honor, we don't have an objection.
Fine. You may proceed.
Thank you. All right, Professor Herrera, are you aware that Ms. Stier was previously married to a man?
I believe I was aware of that, yes.
All right, thank you. And if you look at deposition transcript, page 22, 11, at lines 11 through 12, the witness, which is Ms. Stier, says, quote, "When I married Matthew, I did love him." Does that surprise you?
I have no expectation about it, so it doesn't surprise me.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And the next 3 lines, it says, the question is, were you attracted to him physically? And she responds, I did have an attraction to him. Again, is that something that does not surprise you?
Again, I have no expectations, but so I am not surprised.
All right, thank you. And page 24, lines 5 through 7, Ms. Stier says, in 1987, when we got married in November, we both, I'll speak for myself only, it was my goal to have a meaningful marriage. And in response to the question, did you have a meaningful marriage for any period of time up until the time that you were separated and eventually divorced? She answered, yes, I did. And again, is this something that doesn't surprise you?
And I would just give the same response.
Okay, thank you. And then please turn to page 198. Turn to page 198 to 199, and I'm going to start reading with line 24. And the question is, has it always been the case that you've had an enduring pattern or disposition to experience sexual, affectional, or romantic desires for and attractions to women? Has that always been the case in your life? And the answer is, no, it has not. Does that surprise you?
I would say that that's consistent in part with what I was saying earlier about the expectation that most people are raised with, that they will be heterosexual. And so I think when you ask people about their entire life, you would be including that period for a number of people who identify as gay or lesbian. And they might very well be able to point to a portion of their life in which they were at least assuming that they were themselves heterosexual and did experience some sort of attraction for people of the other sex. And at the same time, did not acknowledge or experience attraction towards people of the same sex at that one point in their lives.
So that using the enduring attraction definition, which is one of the ones that you offered, at that point in her life, Ms. Stier would not have been gay, correct?
Well, you know, when you ask me about what constitutes an enduring pattern or how long this takes, I said we don't have a specific amount of time. But in this question, you're asking her about that. You're defining that time period. It appears to me anyway as being her entire life. And I don't think that that's part of the definition, that people are this for their entire life, that they experience this over the course of their entire life. I would say that experiencing it for what the individual perceives to be a significant period of time in their life is what's referred to here, not that people have been this way for their entire life.
All right, thank you. A 2003 survey of California adults found that approximately 9% of gay men and 25% of lesbians 18 to 59 years of age reported having ever been married, most of them presumably to a person of the same sex, correct?
Was that in the report that the UCLA researchers produced from the Williams Institute at UCLA?
It's something you cited in your expert report, actually.
Okay, I didn't footnote it, though.
It's note 37. It's if you'd like to look at it, it's tab 1 that has your expert report.
Yeah, I believe that's the UCLA report. It would just help me to know for sure if you're going to ask about it.
It's note 37, page 18. And if you want to review that to refresh your memory, it says Carpenter and Gates, 2008, table 3.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's a different one than I was thinking of. Okay.
All right. And that's consistent with Ms. Stier's experience, correct?
Well, that some portion of lesbians and gay men report having been married in the past. Yes, I believe that is consistent with her experience.
All right, thank you. And please turn to tab 28 in the witness binder. Before I do that, Your Honor, I would like to offer the portions of the transcript of Ms. Stier's deposition that I read into evidence as admissions.
Very well. I assume no objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well.
All right, thank you. And as I said, please turn to tab 28. You'll find a document pre-marked DIX 1009.
1009, yes.
Can you identify that document?
This is a report from researchers at UCLA at the Williams Institute at that university titled Marriage, Registration, and Dissolution by Same-Sex Couples in the U.S. It was published in 2008.
And who are listed as the authors of this report?
Gary Gates, M.V. Badgett, and Deborah Ho.
All right, thank you. And please look at page 10 in that report, and you will see a figure at the bottom that says figure 5. Well, it's not just the bottom, it's half the page. Percent previously married among individuals and couples who seek marriage or legal recognition. And from the context, if you read above it, it says it's talking of same-sex couples, individuals, and same-sex couples who have been previously married. And you'll see for California, the percentage of males in couples seeking marriage or legal recognition is 20% who were previously married, and for women it was 29%, correct?
That's what it shows, yes.
Yes, thank you. And again, so the fact that Ms. Stier was formerly married to an opposite-sex spouse is not particularly unusual, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, excuse me, Professor Herrich, could you please turn to tab 28A in the witness binder? And Your Honor, this is, again, the same thing with Plaintiff Perry's deposition testimony. And the specific lines that I would like to read are on page 152 from 7 to 15. And I guess I'd like to ask through the court, plaintiff's counsel, if they have any objection to my reading that.
Your Honor, if I could just have a moment to look at that.
Beg your pardon?
It's page 152, line 7 through 15.
152, lines 7 through 7.
15, Your Honor.
Your Honor, subject to some time to obviously supplement with counter designations under the rule of completeness, we won't object.
Well, apropos of that, Mr. Nielsen, would you object to having the question and then the entire answer read?
No, not at all.
All right.
Not at all. But, Your Honor, I'm not sure that for an admission that's the...
What's that?
For an admission, I'm not sure that counter designations are appropriate.
Well, no, but completeness certainly is, and that's why I'm suggesting you read the entire answer.
That would be fine, but I'm just objecting to the idea of some supplemental designation down the road. All right, and I will read the question and I guess the complete answer then. Would that be acceptable? I guess I'll be going back to page 151, line 22. Is that acceptable, Your Honor?
That's...
Okay. Could you explain a little bit as to how that... Oh, that's a pretty...
Hold on a minute. Maybe you really need to go back to line 16 on 151.
Yes.
Sets the context.
Yes, Your Honor. Question. Did you go through a process in ultimately arriving at the conclusion that you were going to identify as a lesbian? Did it take place over time? Answer. It was a process. It took place over a period of time. Question. Could you explain a little bit as to how that process took place? Answer. Well, I guess for me, the earliest conscious memory I have wondering if I might be a lesbian was when I felt a strong attraction to a woman in college. And since I wasn't certain that it might just be a single incident or event or a single person, it took a few years after that point in time to continue to date or feel attracted to understand maybe this enduring pattern in me. So I was aware for other people in the world they had made that decision. So there were people in the world who I might be like that were gay or lesbian or heterosexual, but I wasn't certain until I had had enough other experiences to know that perhaps most likely I am a lesbian. And after having a few years of experience, I arrived at the conclusion and adopted that sexual orientation for myself. Does the phrase "I adopted" and adopted that sexual orientation for myself, does that surprise you in any way?
Well, I think that what she's describing in this entire response is that idea that sexual orientation is generally understood by not only researchers but by many lay individuals as involving an enduring pattern. And so I think what she's describing here is that she experienced these attractions as an enduring pattern, and it was after recognizing this pattern in herself that she adopted the label of lesbian, or that she decided that that was an appropriate way to identify herself. All
right, thank you. And, Your Honor, I would like to move that portion of the transcript that I read into evidence as an admission.
Very well. I assume no objection.
All right. Professor Herrich, please turn to tab 29 in the witness binder, and here you'll find an exhibit pre-marked DIX 1010. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you identify this document?
It's titled A New Look at Women's Sexuality and Sexual Orientation. The authors are Linda Garnetz and Letitia Ann Peplau, and it is published in CSW Update. I have to confess, I'm not sure what that is.
All right, and you're familiar with Professor Garnetz and Professor Peplau, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And please look at page 5 with the page numbers, and there is a subtitle that says The Fluidity of Women's Sexuality and Sexual Orientation.
Yes.
And I'm going to read starting with the second sentence. It says, scholars from many disciplines have noted that women's sexuality tends to be fluid, malleable, shaped by life experiences, and capable of change over time. Do you agree with that characterization of women's sexuality?
Well, I would agree with that statement that scholars from many disciplines have noted that many aspects of women's sexuality tends to be very sensitive to environmental cues. This is not only related to sexual orientation or the sex of a partner, but also the frequency of having sex, the types of sexual behavior that are engaged in and enjoyed. A number of different aspects of women's sexuality have the research literature indicates that there is a greater sensitivity among women than among men to environmental influences or situational influences in many aspects of their sexuality.
All right, and let's read the next sentence. It says, female sexual development is a potentially continuous, lifelong process in which multiple changes in sexual orientation are possible. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I would say that depending upon exactly what you consider development, it is a potentially lifelong, continuous process. This is the general view of all kinds of development that people are developing throughout their lives. So in that regard, sexual development is also probably a lifelong, continuous process. The idea of multiple changes in sexual orientation being possible, I would certainly say that that's true. It is possible, and in some cases it happens, but as we've discussed a number of times, for many people, and in fact most people, it doesn't seem to happen.
All right, thank you. And let's continue then. It says, women's sexuality is responsive throughout the lifespan to a wide range of social, cognitive, and environmental influences. Women who have had exclusively heterosexual experiences may develop an attraction to other women and vice versa. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think that's an accurate characterization of the literature.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, I would like to submit DIX 1010 into evidence.
Your Honor, subject to the same objection earlier that Professor Peplau has been here and subject to cross-examination.
Very well. The witness has been examined with respect to the substance of this. I think it's appropriate to admit it, at least to take judicial notice of it under the evidence rule, but you may proceed.
Thank you very much. Professor Herrera, please turn to tab 30 in the witness binder, and you'll find here a document pre-marked DIX 1229. Could you read that, or could you identify that?
This is an article characterized as a distinguished scholar article in the journal Personal Relationships from 2001. The title is Rethinking Women's Sexual Orientation, an Interdisciplinary Relationship-Focused Approach, and the author is Letitia Ann Peplau.
All right, thank you. And are you familiar with this document?
No, I've never seen this before.
You are familiar with Professor Peplau, correct?
As I said before, yes, I am.
And you believe she has a good reputation as a scholar in her field, correct?
I believe she has a very solid reputation.
All right, thank you. Please look at page 5 of this article, and halfway down the first column you'll see a subheading, within person variability across time and social setting, and it reads, although some may think of sexual orientation as determined early in life and relatively unchanging from then on, growing evidence indicates that the nature of a woman's intimate relationships can change throughout her life and differ across social settings. Do you agree with that statement?
Again, I think this is consistent with what I've been saying. This can happen.
All right, thank you. And please turn to pages 13 and 14. They're together. You can open them up and you'll be able to read. And in the sentence that starts at the very bottom of the second column on page 13, Professor Peplau writes, Hazan and Diamond, and again, I believe this is Professor Diamond that we've discussed, rejected the idea that individuals have specific gender-based images of a suitable partner and suggested instead that the search image for human mating is inherently flexible. Just as infants can form attachments to a wide range of potential caretakers, so too adults can become infatuated and bond with a range of partners. Do you agree with that statement? Or let me rephrase that. Do you agree with Hazan and Diamond's position as described here by Professor Peplau?
Well, I actually don't believe I've read the article by Hazan and Diamond, so I don't know that I can agree or disagree with it. I honestly, I don't believe I've read that article, so knowing exactly what is involved in this, I mean, you have Dr. Peplau making a one-sentence characterization of the article, and it's not that I would suspect her of doing that inaccurately, but as far as deciding whether this is something I agree with or not, I would really need to read the article to get the context for it.
So if I were to ask you, is the idea that, okay, that individuals have that the search image for human mating is inherently flexible, and just as infants can form attachments to a wide range of potential caretakers, so too adults can become infatuated and bond with a range of partners. If I just stated it like that, would you disagree with it?
Well, you know, I think that those terms, infatuated and bonding, and the use of the terms around attachment, all of this suggests to me, again, without having read the article, but this may actually be talking more about the experience of love, romantic love, or very strong feelings of platonic love as opposed to sexual attraction. So, again, I'm just not sure of the context, you know, and I haven't read this article by Dr. Peplau, so and then she's quoting from this other article that I haven't read. So it's very difficult to try to comment on two things for which I don't really have a good context.
I'm actually just asking you if you agree with the statement that's written there. And is your answer that you just can't, one way or the other, without knowing more?
My answer is that I don't think I can without having read the entire article.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, I would like to offer DIX 1229 into evidence.
Your Honor, again, this is an article that this witness hasn't seen by a witness who was here last week, so we'd lodge objections on that.
I think it comes in under 803, or at least under judicial notice, so we'll admit it for the record.
Thank you very much. Now please turn back to tab 14 if you would, and you'll see, here you'll find the document that we've talked about earlier today.
Yes.
And if you could turn to page 333, and under within person variation or change over time, the second full paragraph, you'll see a line that says, further, both women's identification as lesbian, bisexual, or heterosexual and women's actual behavior can vary over time. You agree with that, correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where you are.
Page 333.
Yeah, I'm there.
The second full paragraph under within person variation.
Oh, okay.
The first sentence says, further, both women's identification as lesbian, bisexual, or heterosexual and women's actual behavior can vary over time. And you agree with that, correct?
Yeah, I think I've said that several times. That can happen, yes.
All right. And page 345, you could turn there. And the second full paragraph on the page, it's quite near the bottom. Actually, it's the last full paragraph on the page. Partway through, it reads, quote, the factors shaping women's attractions and relationships vary across a life cycle. For example, the role of sexual arousal and passion may be different in the relationships of adolescents, middle-aged women, and older adults. Although some women remain in the same job throughout their life, other women make major career changes. Similarly, women's erotic and romantic attractions can also shift and change during their lifetimes. Do you agree with that statement?
With the final statement?
Well, let's break it up. Do you agree that the factors shaping women's attractions and relationships vary across the life cycle?
They can.
Okay, thank you. And do you agree that women's erotic and romantic attractions can shift and change during their lifetimes?
It can. They can, yes. All
right, thank you. And that's already in. Please turn to tab 34 in the witness binder, and you'll find here a document pre-marked DIX 1270. Can you identify that document?
This is the title page from an edited book called The Psychology of Sexual Orientation, Behavior and Identity, a handbook. It's edited by Louis Diamond and Richard McNulty.
All right, thank you. And if you look inside the document, you'll see that there's a specific chapter here. Can you identify that?
Yes. So this is a chapter in this 1995 book by Michael Kauth and Seth Kalichman. It's titled Sexual Orientation and Development, an Interactive Approach.
All right, thank you. Now please turn to page 82 of the page, of the article, excuse me. And you'll see that it, in the first column, well, it's actually just page 82, I guess. It says, by sexual orientation, we mean the cumulative experiences of interaction of erotic fantasy, romantic emotional feelings, and sexual behavior directed toward one or both genders. These three somewhat independent and parallel dimensions are traditionally conceived as being overlaid on a plane of sexual orientation. And that's similar to what we have discussed, correct?
I believe so.
And then it says, this model suggests that sexual orientation is not static and may vary throughout the course of a lifetime. Do you agree with that statement?
As I said earlier, it is possible and it may vary, yes.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, I would like to offer DIX 1270 into evidence.
Very well, 1270 is admitted.
All right, thank you. And please turn back to tab 19 in the binder. And this is something we discussed earlier today. And please turn to page 4 in this printout of this article. And please look at the last full paragraph on the bottom of the page. We read a little bit from the paragraph that follows, but in the last full paragraph, starting with the second sentence, it reads, "There is essentially no research on the longitudinal stability of sexual orientation over the adult lifespan. In other words, even if one could satisfactorily measure the complex components of sexual orientation as differentiated from other aspects of sexual identity at one point in time, it is still an unanswered question whether this measure will predict future behavior or orientation." Do you disagree with that statement?
Well, I believe that what they're talking about here is the absence of prospective longitudinal research where the same individuals are followed over a long period of their lifetime, and where ideally you would do this with a large representative sample of individuals. I would say that we certainly do have retrospective accounts from individuals pointing to consistency over the course of their lifetime in terms of many of these variables. And we can go back yet again to the Lauman and Gagnon study, which asked about the attractions and identity in the present, but asked about sexual behavior in the past. So this unanswered question about whether the measure will predict future behavior or orientation, I would say, given the way they phrase this, it would be an unanswered question, and that they are not proposing, I don't think, a particular measure that one would even use in this. And so again, I would say, as I said before, that if you are trying to predict a person's future sexual behavior, especially if this is an adult, someone who has gotten past adolescence and maybe even young adulthood, that you would probably do best to hypothesize that their behaviors will be consistent with their current sexual orientation, if in fact they engage in sexual behaviors. I believe one of the reservations I had in my deposition was that you might not even know that the individual is going to engage in any sexual behavior. So people end up being celibate or asexual for various reasons.
Sure.
But I would just say that, again, we do have these retrospective accounts. The prospective study with the large representative sample, it's true, we don't have.
All right, thank you. And now, I don't think they are talking about celibacy here. I think they're talking about just, if you can satisfactorily, even if you could satisfactorily measure the complex components of sexual orientation as differentiated from other aspects of sexual identity, at one point in time, it is still an unanswered question whether this measure will predict future behavior orientation. Do you disagree with that?
Well, it's noteworthy that one of the authors of this paper is Randall Sell, who proposed that very complicated way of measuring sexual orientation. So the statement that even if one could satisfactorily measure the complex components, I think perhaps he was alluding to what I think was something he was going to be publishing in the future. So I don't think he had it at that point that this paper was written. But yes, as far as predicting future behavior or orientation, we don't have that sort of large-scale perspective study.
All right, thank you. Please look at tab 16, and this is the Lauman study again. Please turn to page 310. And since we're talking about retrospective data, this is not longitudinal, to be sure. Starting at the bottom of 310, last full sentence on the page.
I'm sorry, 310?
Excuse me. Actually, it's not a full sentence. It's a sentence that starts at the bottom of 310 and doesn't finish until the next page. Beginning with the distribution of partners by gender in the last year, we find that 2.7% of the men had a male partner and 1.3% of the women a female partner. Of these, about 3 out of 4 report having only same-gender partners in the past 12 months, while the other quarter had at least one partner of each gender. Okay, are you familiar with those statistics?
Yes, I'm generally familiar with this. Those specific statistics, I wouldn't have been able to quote you from memory.
All right, so that's for the last year, and then it goes on to say, in the past 5 years, 4.1% of the men and 2.2% of the women had at least one same-gender partner. About half these men had both male and female partners in this time period. The women are more likely than the men to have had sex with both men and women than only same-gender partners. Almost 2/3 of the women reporting a female partner in the last 5 years also report a male partner. Are you familiar with those statistics, Professor Herrera?
Generally, yes.
Okay, thank you. The proportion of the men with male partners since age 18 who report having had only male partners declines to about 20% of the total. For women, the comparable figure is about 10%. Are you familiar with those figures?
Again, in general, yes.
So for 1 year, it was 25% of men, and
What?
for both, actually. And then in the past 5 years, it was 50% for men and 2/3 for women. Since 18, it was 20% for men and 10% for women who had had exclusively same-sex partners, correct?
No, I don't think you said that correctly.
All right, let's do it one at a time.
Okay.
For the past year, for both men and women, of the individuals who had same-sex partners or a same-sex partner, 75% had only same-sex partners, whereas 25% had at least one opposite-sex partner, correct?
Correct.
For the past 5 years, for men who had had a same-sex partner during that period, 50% had also had an opposite-sex partner, correct?
Yes.
And for women during that 5-year period, of the women who had had a same-sex partner during that period, 2/3 had also had a male partner, correct?
Correct.
And looking since age 18, of men who had male partners since 18, 80% had also had opposite-sex partners, correct?
Yes, apparently at least one opposite-sex partner.
Yes, and for women, that comparable figure since 18 is 10%. So only 10% of the women who had had a same-sex partner since 18 had had exclusively same-sex partners, correct?
Yes.
And then it says, when the time period under consideration is extended to all partners since puberty, the proportion of men with only male partners declines again to 10% of the men with any male partners, correct?
That's what it says.
All right, and are you, again, you're familiar with those statistics, correct?
Yes, and as I said, it's not terribly surprising that many lesbians and gay men at some point in their life do end up having sexual relationships with the person of the other sex.
And not just at some point in their life. In the past 5 years, at least half, though I guess this is in terms of behavior.
Yeah. This is just talking about all the men and women who reported any instance of same-sex behavior or of same-sex attraction or interest or of being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. And again, I think it's just important to keep in mind in this study, the people who identified as lesbian, gay, or bisexual tended to be very consistent in reporting their current attractions as being to the same sex and as reporting having partners of the same sex. Although it is the case that that some of them earlier in life did have partners of the other sex, or at least one partner of the other sex.
This is specifically talking about same-sex partners, not just attraction, correct? This is conduct.
This is about sexual behavior.
Yes, thank you. All right, and that is already admitted. So please turn to tab. Well, actually, the bad news, Your Honor, is I have another binder. The good news is it's much thinner than this one.
It's one.
It's much thinner than this one.
I see. Then we can put this one aside, can we?
I may come back to it, so don't put it too far off to the side.
I see.
Your Honor, permission to approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Small, very small.
Very small.
Is this the last binder with this witness?
It is the last binder, Your Honor.
All right.
I am happy to report it is the last binder. Okay. And the second witness binder, if you could turn to tab 35.
Okay.
And you'll find here a document pre-marked DIX 856.
Yes.
And can you identify this document?
This is an article from the journal Developmental Psychology from 2008. The author is Lisa Diamond, and the title is Female Bisexuality from Adolescence to Adulthood, Results from a 10-Year Longitudinal Study.
Thank you. Are you familiar with this study?
Yeah, I am familiar with this study, yes.
Thank you. And again, you are familiar with Professor Diamond.
I am still familiar with Professor Diamond, yes.
You haven't forgotten her yet?
Not yet.
Right. All right, thank you. All right. Now, this is a 10-year longitudinal study of a group of non-heterosexual women, correct?
This particular article, I believe, only focuses on non-heterosexual women. In her larger study, there were some heterosexual women, but I don't believe she reports on them in this paper.
All right, thank you. And please turn to page 9, and you'll see under results in the, well, just reading under change in identity, starting with the second line. In all, 32% of women changed identities from T1 to T2, 25% from T2 to T3, 30% from T3 to T4, and 28% from T4 to T5. And those are different points along the 10 years. And the next section says, by the 10-year point, 67% of participants had changed their identities at least once since T1, and 36% had changed identities more than once. So only 33% of the women she studied retained the same sexual orientation across the 10-year period, correct?
You know, in this study, she began by recruiting about 89 women who did not identify as being heterosexual. And so she recruited women who call themselves lesbians, women who call themselves bisexual, and also women who said that they were uncertain about their sexuality or were questioning their sexuality. And so what she found were these patterns of women changing the labels that they attached to their sexuality. She, in her book, makes the point that, in her view, this did not reflect a change in the women's sexual orientation. And if you read her article for this, this study as on a whole, what you see is that the patterns of sexual attraction reported by the women tended to remain fairly stable. And it was the case that most of the change in labeling was among the women who were initially calling themselves bisexuals or those who were initially unlabeled. So there was movement back and forth between those two categories. Some bisexual women came to call themselves lesbians. Some bisexual women came to call themselves heterosexuals. As I understand it, there were very few women who called themselves lesbians in the first place who called themselves heterosexuals at the end. I honestly don't know if there were any who did that. But there were some women who identified as lesbian at the beginning who subsequently, after this study went on for 10 years and they had gotten out of college and had were in their later 20s, adopted a label of bisexual for themselves.
All right, thank you. And so this is a case where the identity was changing, but not the attraction. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think, yeah. Actually, I think that she often focuses more on the word labeling more so than identity, but yes.
All right. Your Honor, I would like to introduce, would like to offer DIX 856.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, 856 is admitted.
All right, please turn to tab 35A. And here you'll find an exhibit pre-marked DIX 626. Can you identify that document?
This is an article with several authors. The first author is Nigel Dixon, which is D-I-C-K-S-O-N. It's titled Same-Sex Attraction in a Birth Cohort, Prevalence and Persistence in Early Adulthood. It was published in 2003 in the journal Social Science and Medicine.
If you look at page 1611, you will see this is a longitudinal study that looked at 451 men and 436 women who reported their current sexual attraction at both ages 21 and 26, correct?
I'm sorry, could you say what page you're on again?
It's on page 1611.
Oh, okay.
And you will see under sexual attraction at ages 21 and 26, you'll see this is a longitudinal study with 451 men and 436 women who reported their current sexual attractions at both ages 21 and 26. And then on page 1612, under the discussion in the second paragraph, you see some fairly complex figures over that showing the various permutations of change. But it says, the findings also reveal a surprising degree of change over time. 10% of men and nearly a quarter of the women reported same-sex attraction at any time, but this nearly halved for current attraction at age 26. The changes were not just in one direction. The instability was most marked for women, with a greater movement away from exclusively heterosexual attractions from age 21 to 26 than among men.
I'm sorry. Could you tell me? Could you tell me again where you're reading from? I apologize.
That's the first full paragraph from the first column on 1612.
Oh.
Okay, I'll give you just a moment.
I'm there now. Yeah, I found you.
Now, do those changes in any way surprise you?
Well, I don't believe I'm familiar with this paper, but I am familiar with earlier papers that came from this study. And my recollection from one of the earlier papers was that I was concerned because in this rather large sample, there were only 9 males and I believe 11 women, 11 females who identified as being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. And so there were problems with generalizing from such a small number. But as I said earlier, adolescence and even into early adulthood are times of identity formation and development for many people, most people. And so in that sense, I wouldn't be surprised to see some changes in how people understand their sexuality as they progress through their teens and into their early 20s.
All right, thank you. And, Your Honor, I would like to offer DIX 626.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well.
All right, please turn to tab 35B, if you would. Can you, and here you'll find a document pre-marked DIX 666, and can you identify that?
I'm sorry, 666?
DIX 666, it's at 35B.
Oh, okay.
Okay, can you identify that document?
Yes.
All right, could you?
I'm sorry. Would I? You asked me. Never mind. I misheard you.
It's all right. Go ahead.
This is an article published in the Journal of Sex Research in 1997. Multiple authors. The first of them is Joseph Stokes, and it's titled "Predictors of Movement Toward Homosexuality: A Longitudinal Study of Bisexual Men."
All right. Thank you. And if you look at page 308 in the third column, you will find that in this, this is a one-year longitudinal study, I suppose, and it says, on a self-rated 7-point sexual orientation scale, 73 respondents moved towards homosexuality, 34%, 37 moved towards heterosexuality, 17%, and 106 did not change, 49% from time 1 to time 2, correct?
And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to catch up to you. Can you tell me where you're reading from again?
It's from page 308, top of the third column.
Okay, I'm there.
And so, of this sample, 73% moved towards homosexuality, 34% moved towards heterosexuality, and 49% did not change. And this is a one-year longitudinal study of bisexual men. Do those numbers surprise you at all?
Well, and of course, it's important to remember that this is not a representative sample, but just in looking at it quickly, and I believe I may have read this paper at one point, but not for a long time. They were recruiting, as they say, relatively young men in their late teens and in their 20s, who said that they had had sex with a man and also sex with a woman. They had to meet both of those criteria in the past 3 years. And so it appeared, and I'm just doing this very quickly as I glance through it, but it would appear that they were recruiting people based mainly on their sexual behaviors. And so the idea, again, that in early adulthood, some people who had engaged in sexual behavior with both men and women would at some point shift toward being exclusively with either men or women does not particularly surprise me. And it appears that roughly half of them did not change during that time period.
All right, thank you. And, Your Honor, I would like to offer DIX 666.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well.
We have talked about change, Professor Herrich, and no one in this case is suggesting that gay men and lesbians should be forced to change their sexual orientation or even attempt to do so. But is it your opinion that a gay man or lesbian who wishes to change his or her sexual orientation can never do so?
It is my opinion that the current research does not indicate that interventions that are designed for that purpose have been shown to be effective using the criteria that I described this morning. It certainly is the case that there have been many people who, most likely because of societal stigma, wanted very much to change their sexual orientation and were not able to do so. Now, whether or not it is something that could possibly happen, I don't know. I think that we simply don't have data that indicates that any of the interventions that have been developed for this purpose are effective or are safe.
All right, and stepping back from the rather technical definition of effective that you have offered, which involved generalizability and absence of harm and a wide variety of things, if I recall, and just speaking in ordinary language, do you believe it's impossible for someone to change their sexual orientation who wishes to?
I would be reluctant to say that anything is impossible, so I would not say it's impossible.
And there are self-reports of people who say that that has happened, correct?
There are indeed self-reports of people who say that that has happened.
All right, thank you. And is it your opinion that such attempts are always harmful?
That interventions to change people's sexual orientations are always harmful?
Yes.
No. Again, as I said earlier, we don't have experimental data on either that would suggest that these treatments are effective, nor do we have experimental data showing that they are consistently harmful. We do have some data from experimental studies showing harm to some of the participants, and we do have self-reports of people who believed or perceived that they were harmed as a result of going through one or more of these interventions.
And you said two things. You said self-reports of harm?
Yes.
And you said, before that, you said some data.
Yes.
All right. And what particularly do you have in mind there?
Well, if you read the research reports, most of them published in the 1970s, mostly in the 1970s, I believe, what you see is that there are reports in those studies that some people who were experiencing some sort of intervention or therapy or treatment designed to change them from homosexual to heterosexual experienced or were observed to have clinical depression or anxiety or other sorts of negative experiences or negative psychological states, that happened in conjunction with going through these treatment programs.
All right, but again, the data is quite limited, correct, in both with respect to whether it can happen and whether it's harmful. Is that correct?
Well, the data that are available don't suggest that these interventions are effective, meaning that they work most of the time with the people they are supposed to work with and that they do so safely.
Yes. Now, thank you. I believe I understand your technical definition of effective. Let's turn to tab 35C of the binder. And can you, you'll find here a document pre-marked PX1503. Can you identify that document?
This is an article by Robert Spitzer, published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior in 2003. The title is, Can Some Gay Men and Lesbians Change Their Sexual Orientation? 200 participants reporting a change from homosexual to heterosexual orientation.
All right, thank you. Now, you are familiar with this author, correct?
I don't know the author personally. I know who he is.
Right, and he is a very prominent psychiatrist who is certainly considered to be an expert in his field, correct?
He is a very prominent psychiatrist who is considered to be an expert on clinical diagnosis, and in fact, he was involved in many of the deliberations surrounding changes to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And
by that, you mean the decision to remove homosexuality as a disorder, correct?
Well, he was involved in many other aspects of the DSM as well.
Okay, thank you. And he was very closely involved in the process that led to the removal of homosexuality from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, correct?
I believe that he was chairing, or was at least a prominent member of the committee of the American Psychiatric Association convened on that question.
Okay, yes. Please turn to page 413, and please look in the second column, the first full paragraph, and it writes, this study indicates that some gay men and lesbians following reparative therapy report that they have had major changes from a predominantly homosexual orientation to a predominantly heterosexual orientation. Now, I understand in your work that you have raised questions about whether that finding can be generalized in any meaningful way, correct?
Well, you know, that sentence, I think, accurately states what he found, which is that some gay men and lesbians report that they made major changes, and they did that after they had been through one of these reparative therapy interventions. So I wouldn't take issue with the statement. What I would take issue with is going beyond that statement to say that this study actually shows that it was those interventions that brought about this self-perceived change in sexual orientation, and that these same individuals who were highly religious and, in fact, belonged to various organizations that were promoting the idea of behavior change for homosexuals, that they wouldn't have changed simply on their own without this intervention. The study doesn't show that.
All right, thank you. But you don't question the specific findings that we just read, correct?
People reported to him that they felt they had changed.
All right, thank you. And, Your Honor, I would like to offer PX 1503 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well.
And now, do you question whether those reports from the individuals were accurate?
Well, the problem is that we know that people are not always aware of their mental processes, and they are not always aware of why things happen or why they do things. And this is the reason why when we are trying to test the effectiveness of a treatment or a drug, we use an experimental design, which means that we randomly assign people to various groups, and we then observe before and after their participation in the group exactly what has happened on the variable of interest. We also, I think, are generally familiar with things such as the placebo effect, that people will sometimes in a pharmaceutical study get a sugar pill and they will feel better, or some of their symptoms will go away, but they didn't actually receive the drug, they just received a placebo. So this is just an illustration of how people are not really necessarily able to tell you why things have happened to them or why things have changed sometimes.
All right, and now, in your studies, haven't you relied on self-reporting?
Yes.
And you do take the individuals at their word, correct?
Well, I try not to, usually anyway, ask questions that would require people to report things that they're not capable of reporting. But I would say that in my research, where in situations where I have tried to show cause and effect, I have tried to use an experimental design for that purpose.
All right, well, for example, when you ask individuals whether they experience little or no choice with respect to their sexual orientation, you take them at their word, correct?
I take them at their word that they experience little or no choice. Yes, I don't think that's a matter of them saying, for example, how they became lesbian or gay or bisexual. It's rather just simply asking them, have they experienced conscious choice in this regard? And what most of the lesbian and gay men said was that no, they didn't experience conscious choice.
All right, thank you. Please turn to tab 35D in the witness binder, and you will find a document pre-marked DIX 1014. I'm sure you'll be able to, you can't identify this document, correct?
Well, this is actually, it's not on here, but this appears to me to be an actual copy of a letter that Sigmund Freud wrote to a woman from the United States that had written to him about her son being homosexual, and it's often referred to as the letter to an American mother. And I believe this was published quite a long time ago in a psychiatric journal, but I don't remember which one, and the reference is not, it's not here. So.
Thank you. And fortunately for us, there's a typewritten copy of the letter. If you look to on page 787, so we don't have to try and read the handwriting. Now please look at reading from the typewritten version, the first full paragraph on page 787. And this is Freud responding to an American mother, as you said.
Yes.
By asking me if I can help, you mean, I suppose, if I can abolish homosexuality and make normal heterosexuality take its place. The answer is, in a general way, we cannot promise to achieve it. In a certain number of cases, we succeed in developing the blighted germs of heterosexual tendencies, which are present in every homosexual. In the majority of cases, there is no more possible. It is a question of the quality and the age of the individual. The result of treatment cannot be predicted. Now, do you believe Freud was mistaken when he said that in a certain number of cases we succeeded in developing what he described as the blighted germ of heterosexual tendencies?
Well, you know, Freud was writing this in 1935, and at that time there were certainly psychoanalysts who attempted to cure homosexuality, although it's I think it's relevant to note that in this letter, in the first paragraph, Freud said, homosexuality is assuredly no advantage, but it is nothing to be ashamed of. No vice, no degradation. It cannot be classified as an illness. We consider it to be a function a variation of the sexual function produced by a certain arrest of sexual development. And he goes on to list people like Michelangelo and Leonardo who were homosexuals. And he says, it is a great injustice to persecute homosexuality as a crime and cruelty too, in the context of him. Oh, I'm sorry.
So Freud plainly did not have animus towards homosexuals, correct?
Right, and what he was telling the mother who wrote this was that in the last paragraph, what analysis can do for your son runs in a different line. If he is unhappy, neurotic, torn by conflicts, inhibited in his social life, analysis may bring him harmony, peace of mind, full efficiency, whether he remains a homosexual or gets changed. And Freud, I believe, I'm not a Freud scholar, but I believe that Freud actually very pessimistic about the likelihood of psychoanalysis being able to change a person's sexual orientation. His comment there about the germs of heterosexuality are consistent with Freud's general view of human sexuality. His theory was that all people are inherently bisexual and that they become heterosexual or homosexual only in the course of their development.
All right, thank you. And that is certainly the other parts of the letter, but he specifically says, in a certain number of cases, we succeed. Do you believe he was mistaken, misrepresenting?
Well, you know, there's a real problem with looking at intervention attempts by psychoanalysts, I mean, not just Freud, but by other psychoanalysts, because typically you have a situation in which the analyst is the person who's, if you will, both administering the treatment and monitoring its success. And so the analyst wants very much for it to succeed, right? Often the patient wanted very much for this to succeed. And in that sort of situation, there is a great possibility for the patient to indicate to the analyst, either consciously or unintentionally, that he or she is changing, and that may not, in fact, be happening. So the standard for how we evaluate the effectiveness of an intervention were not followed by Freud or by other analysts to whom he might have been referring in that letter.
All right, thank you. So do you think it's impossible that he might have been both accurate and honest in making that statement?
Well, I don't mean to imply that Freud was dishonest in any way. But in terms of accuracy, I would say that he might have perceived this as being an effective change, but whether or not that would pass muster with the current standards of experimental research would be an open question.
All right, thank you. Now, Your Honor, I have a little bit more, though it's a fairly good breaking point.
Why don't we just plow on?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor?
Let's ask the witness.
I was wondering how long we're likely to plow on, otherwise I might request a break otherwise.
That's a good question. How much longer do you think we have?
It depends in part on the length of the answers, to be honest, but I think probably between, probably about a half an hour, 45 minutes.
Okay. Do you want a break?
I'll stay pat for the moment.
If the situation changes, we'll be happy to take a break. Why don't we just stand up anyway and stretch?
Your Honor, I obviously will have some redirect. I'll keep it as brief as possible, but just for our planning purposes, I'm thinking no more than a half hour.
I understand. Counsel, we are going to take a break.
Okay.
Much appreciated, Your Honor.